At the Council of Chalcedon, after defining the Christological nature of Christ as two natures, one person, the bishops acclaimed that Peter had spoken through Leo. Is that what the bishops are saying today of Pope Leo after he has promulgated by signing off on the latest document in reference to Our Lady? Are they too saying that Peter has spoken for Leo? Now, of course, the document in question that we're going to talk about here today is not one that was written on an infallible level. It does not carry that decree. We're going to get into all that here today at Lumen Christi Ministries. We're also going to get into the language and what exactly the document talks about, particularly just focusing on the Mediatrix of all graces and Co-Redemptrix aspect, particularly just 2 paragraphs in relation to that element, and how in recently getting my Mariology to in taking a Mariology course as a part of my master's degree, how that was actually language that was highly a part of the class. So where is it that we're heading with the language? Why is it the church is saying we shouldn't use it? What is it the church is actually saying, and how is it that we're called to respond? All that and much more here today on Lumen Christi Ministries. If you have yet to become a patron, I invite you to do so. And today I offered to anyone free of charge for anyone who wants to become a patron, but it's going to be open to the public. So if you want to make your way over to Patreon, Lumen Christi, I'll put the link on it right now. Lumen Christi C Ministries. Anyway, I'll have a special bonus clip for a special devotion to Saint Louis de Montfort and what he says on servants and slaves and how that pertains to submission of intellect and will, which we're going to talk about in relation to the papacy, but how that could pertain and how that could pertain to submission of intellect and will, and how that relates to our times today. So if you want to check it out in the link, check it out at the end of the show or at the end of the video. I offer that to you for free of charge. And if you want to become a patron and go check out the rest of the content that's there for various prices, I invite you to please do so as well. And know that by becoming a patron, whether you pay to view the content or not, you are still supporting this channel. Even if you're becoming a free patron, you're still supporting me with your prayers, and you're helping to build the light of Christ, and you're helping us to minister better, and you're helping us to bring God's mission to the world, which I truly believe is to bring light into the darkness. And so one of the darknesses that we're encountering right now in the world is papal submission of intellect and will. We struggle to accept this idea. We struggle to accept this submission when we have our leaders, mainly in this case the Pope or bishops or the cardinals, speaking in a way that we don't always agree with, or in a way that we question. And so for context, we have an entire movement devoted right now to this fifth Marian Dogma, where these very words, Co-Redemptrix, Mediatrix of all graces, were being used to define Our Lady's spiritual motherhood. So the fifth Marian Dogma is a movement that's petitioning our Holy Father. It's been going on for a number of years, so it didn't just begin under Pope Leo. It was happening under Francis, happened under Benedict and John Paul II, I believe. It's been going on, I believe, since the 1900s. From what I understand, I'll have a link to my Mariology professor. He he gives a much deeper dive into the whole movement in the link below. But just a little context here. The movement seeks to define Our Lady's spiritual motherhood. So we have Our Lady is Immaculate Conception. So we have Our Lady before birth. We have Our Lady's Assumption. So we have Our Lady after heaven. But we don't have Our Lady, we don't have a dogma defining Our Lady's relationship to us. Oh, and then we have Our Lady's motherhood, so her relationship to Christ. So we have Our Lady before death, after death, and her relationship to Christ. But what is her relationship to the people? And so this dogma, or this new document that came out recently from the church, let me get the official title. As always, it's probably in Latin. Yep, Mater Populi Fidelis, or Mater Populi Fidelis. Forgive my Latin for not being on par. But the recent document put out a doctrinal note on some Marian titles regarding Mary's cooperation in the work of salvation. So many people will say that this is a movement, or this is a move away from the fifth Marian dogma. And what my professor very much articulated was, he didn't quite say it like this, but what I think I heard is that it's not a movement away from it. It's actually a movement towards better defining the spiritual motherhood of Our Lady. And what he articulates in the link below is that we're seeking to identify and define solemnly, that means infallibly, Our Lady's spiritual motherhood on a dogmatic level. So that means that the church has believed it from all its history. And so we're petitioning the Holy Father to define this, to define what has the church always believed about Our Lady from all of history and in relation to the people. And these titles, Co-Redemptrix and Mediatrix of all graces, are titles that have been used to define the spiritual motherhood and how it works. And now the document that has come forth has simply said that these titles are leading to confusion and they should not be used. And specifically in paragraph 22, it says of the title Co-Redemptrix, given the necessity of explaining Mary's subordinate role to Christ in the work of redemption, it is always inappropriate to use the title, quote, Co-Redemptrix, to define Mary's cooperation. This title risks obscuring Christ's unique salvific mediation and can therefore create confusion and an imbalance in the harmony of the truths of the Christian faith, for there is salvation in no one else. For there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. Acts 4:12. When an expression requires many repeated explanations to prevent it from staying from a correct meaning, it does not serve the faith of the people of God and becomes unhelpful. In this case, the expression Co-Redemptrix does not help extol Mary as the first and foremost collaborator in the work of redemption and grace, for it carries the risk of eclipsing the exclusive role of Jesus Christ, the Son of God made man for our salvation, who was the only one capable of offering the Father a sacrifice of infinite value, which would not be a true honor to his mother. Indeed, as the handmaid of the Lord, Luke 1:38, Mary directs us to Christ and asks us to do whatever he tells us to do. Or ask us to do whatever he tells you. John 2:5. And then it goes on to explain the Mediatrix of all graces title. And you'll see that these titles have been appearing, so they're not new titles, they have been appearing. Popes have used them, but again, it's let me see if there's something here that, because I did say I would talk about the Mediatrix of all graces title. So we can see on Article 26 that it does acknowledge that it is clear that Mary had a real mediatory role in enabling the incarnation of the Son of God in our humanity, since the Redeemer was to be born of woman. And that's what's being missed, is her submissive role in the mediation. She's not a divine person. Jesus is the divine person. She's a human person interceding on our behalf. And so she is mediating in a unique way, but because, like we just read, there's confusion in the title, the church is saying that we should sway away from these titles and consider, actually it says we should use other titles that are more fitting of what it is we're actually saying. That doesn't mean that these titles won't at some time resurface and be considered as a part of her spiritual motherhood. But ultimately, that's what we are petitioning for, is Our Lady's definition of spiritual motherhood. And I think what's important about this too is we consider what happened at the Vatican II Council, where the bishops left in tears because Our Lady did not get enough attention. And so now we have an entire document devoted to Our Lady. It shows that we are moving in the right direction, that the church is listening to its people. And I think we can respond negatively so often. We can react so begrudgingly because we see this big sign that says not Co-Redemptrix, and we just jump on the bandwagon of anti-pope, and we fall into this danger of dissent, and we don't actually evaluate the facts. We don't actually consider what is actually being said, what is going on. And something to consider too is days after the Pope signed off on this document, he called all the cardinals to Rome for a meeting in January, for a 2-day meeting. So that's very interesting, and it sounds like they're going to be discussing issues of the church. So it sounds like the Pope is very much taking a forward action on addressing issues that are facing the church today. One of those issues is, who is Our Lady to us, and how can we better understand her relationship to us, so that we can better draw closer to her as her spiritual children. And so, the other aspect to this whole thing, which I thought more of my reflection was going to be on, we haven't even touched on it yet, is the submission of intellect and will. And we've done a number of videos on this before, but it's here that I want to focus on the different degrees of documents. It from the perspective of, because I'm not educated on every single possible degree of documents that's out there, and there's not a single one document that you can just pull that up. But as you can see, the different levels that we're called to believe. So we'll just read Donum Veritatis and discover what it is I'm talking about, and then we'll find out it from there. All right, so paragraph 23. When the Magisterium of the Church makes an infallible pronouncement and solemnly declares that a teaching is found in Revelation, the assent called for is that of a theological faith. This kind of adherence is to be given even to the teaching of the ordinary and universal magisterium, when it proposes for belief a teaching of faith as divinely revealed. When the Magisterium proposes in a definitive way truths concerning faith and morals, which even if not divinely revealed, are nevertheless strictly and intimately connected with revelation, these must be firmly accepted and held. When the Magisterium, not intending to act definitively, teaches a doctrine to aid a better understanding of revelation and make explicit its contents, or to recall how some teaching is in conformity with the truths of faith, or finally to guard against ideas that are incompatible with these truths, the response called for is that of the religious submission of will and intellect. This kind of response cannot be simply exterior or disciplinary, but must be understood within the logic of faith and under the impulse of obedience to the faith. So this particular document falls under the last of the three: submission of intellect and will. Again, for more on what that's going to look like, see the Patreon at patreon.com/c/Lumen Christian Ministries. I butchered it completely earlier, but that's the link. But we owe holy reverence to the Holy Father. We owe holy reverence to the bishops and to the cardinals. And when they're teaching in unity with the Holy Father, as we just saw, their authority is elevated. So now they are a part of the ordinary magisterium when they are teaching in unity with the Holy Father. And so the Holy Father signed off on this document, but because it's not a document that's teaching necessarily faith and morals, it's simply instructing and giving guidance. The way I understood it was it's instructing and giving guidance in a way that could prepare for the document that is to teach. So it doesn't necessarily call for, and for more on magisterial documents, I would check out Michael Thornton's podcast, Reason and Theology, and his YouTube channel. Check out the link below. For more on his channel, he breaks these documents down. Dona Veritatis is one of his go-to documents, and he just explains it in a really deep theological way. He also has a course where he goes into it all as well. But yeah, just recognizing intellect, submission of intellect and will. What does that mean? That means that we have to desire to listen, and we have to desire in our heart, because it says not exterior. It says it cannot be simply exterior. That means it has to be an interior movement of the heart to desire to be obedient. And so we're going to see, and I guess we can enter a little bit into it now. I'll give you a little teaser of what might come with Louis de Montfort. We'll see. But you would see this in like a religious order, right? You might not always want to do your obedience. Maybe your obedience is spiritual direction, but maybe you're having like a really hard day. Maybe you don't want to give spiritual direction, or maybe your obedience is to do the dishes. Maybe you don't want to do the dishes. Maybe your obedience is you gotta sing and you just hate singing. I don't know, like I'm not in the religious life, so I don't know what different kinds of obediences they have. I know those are a few of them, but that reality of maybe you don't want to do it, but you still do it out of humility. You do it out of obedience to the authority that you have submitted yourself to. And that is where I think we will transition into what Louis de Montfort says about the difference between a servant and a slave. Because what we will find is there is a difference between a servant and a slave. One has the freedom to leave and one does not. Which one will you choose to be?